It's Mock Draft Monday, which of course means another mock draft here on the channel. And we've done so many at this point. Sometimes we get to a theme. It almost gets to like a podcast at times, right? And the theme of this episode will be J.J. McCarthy. He's one of the most volatile players in the 2024 NFL Draft, if not the most divisive player in the class. You know, every time I draft him to the Vikings, even if I don't trade up at 11 or the Broncos at 12, Raiders at 13, why would we take J.J. McCarthy there? He's going to be available in the second or third round. He's not going to be available then. Maybe the second round. You know, you think about Will Levis dropping. You think about, you know, a lot of these quarterbacks that get all this hype and then end up falling down the board. You know, Mac Jones was thought to be the third overall pick for a moment to the 49ers, and maybe it wasn't going to be Trey Lance. And then Mac Jones ends up going at like 15 or whatever. This is a little bit different. JJ's got legitimate top 10 hype in a class where teams really seem desperate for quarterbacks. The Raiders, Broncos, Vikings, potentially the Giants, Patriots, Commanders, Bears, all of those teams are expected to be heavily considering drafting a QB. And, you know, these teams especially could want to move up. The Giants could want to move up. And these three teams we expect to take a QB in the top three. And there are reports coming out that based on some relationship with Adam Peters, the GM of the Commanders now, that he is expected to take J.J. McCarthy at number 2 overall. I just don't buy it yet. I don't buy it. Now, maybe that's what happens on draft, and I end up, you know, draft night, I look silly thinking J.J. McCarthy doesn't go at number 2, but I just don't see it happening. People have been asking me about this. I just don't see it happening, and it's not because J.J. McCarthy isn't good the way a lot of you think. He's definitely a good prospect, not an elite prospect, but the problem is we have a couple of elite quarterback prospects, in my opinion, in Caleb Williams, Drake May. Jaden Daniels is a very good quarterback prospect as well. And then you have J.J. McCarthy, who's coming in, you know, out of an offense that ran the ball almost every play, it seemed like. Didn't really get a ton of opportunities to throw the ball. Didn't put up these big-time numbers, so people think, oh, he must just not be very good. And I understand that to a level, and it's not that he doesn't have things to work on. He's one of the younger QBs in this class, but still has a wealth of experience even at that young age. There are things to like with him, but I still don't see him getting up to number 2 overall. I just don't see that happening. I think it still ends up being Drake May or Jaden Daniels. I'm going to go Jaden Daniels today. I do think Drake May is the second best or 1A, 1B with Caleb Williams for quarterback in this class. I love Drake May as a prospect. A lot of juice to Jaden Daniels potentially going to the Commanders number 2 overall as well. It seems like they're a wild card. They're going to probably have their choice of the 3 quarterbacks not named Caleb Williams in that top conversation. Which one does it end up being? J.J. McCarthy getting a lot of hype right now. I don't see it happening. I could be wrong. We'll have to see. That's why the NFL draft is so fun. You never really know. You don't know what's true, what's false. Smoke screens galore around this time of the year. But I do think Jaden Daniels is in play to be number 2, so we'll take him there at number 2. As the Patriots, I also expect to take a quarterback. A lot of talk about them trading down as well. I just don't see it happening. I think with this quarterback class, you can feel pretty good about any of these 3. Drake May available on the board at number 3. I think you don't hesitate. Drake May for me, as I said, 1A, 1B with Caleb Williams. I'm a massive Drake May fan. I think he could definitely develop. And we talk about the Patriots a lot of not having the roster around him because, you know, they've had some bad draft picks and haven't been able to keep their star players and things like that. However, for me, I think it's a lot more difficult to find that QB. I understand the allure of taking Marvin Harrison Jr. at 3 because we can feel pretty confident in that he's going to be an amazing player, but it's a lot harder to find that quarterback. You can't really do that down the board. However, if you can find 80% of Marvin Harrison Jr. in a Ladd McConkey at 35 or whatever, or, you know, someone in that same vein, it's a stacked receiver class. I think you prioritize the quarterback, and that's what I expect teams to do. Harrison Jr. is a crazy good player, but I just think we're going to see a run on QBs, and I think that run will continue here. I think the Cardinals, similarly to the way they did last year, could be looking to move down for the right price. And the Vikings, we know, traded up to number 23 with the Texans, and we don't think they're just doing that because they want an extra first-round pick. The thought right now is that the Vikings do that because they want a QB. And they might be very high on J.J. McCarthy. And here's the thing. Is McCarthy a perfect quarterback prospect? As we'll throw in 4 and 104 to get 11 and 23. I think that's about fair. The Vikings obviously trading a lot, but they're expected to. Here's my thought with this is that even if you don't believe in J.J. McCarthy as a player, right, there are things to like. Not debatable things. He's got an above average arm very easily. He's got above average speed. He's been able to make big time plays on 3rd and 4th down for Michigan when they actually have to pass sometimes. And he's someone that is capable of making tight window throws. You just didn't see it very often because they didn't throw the ball very often. He is super young. And of course, we know how teams might value the winning element. Of course, he happened to be on a really good team. Does he win a national championship with even Tennessee last year? Not sure. Yeah, of course, if you go down to like Florida or whatever, some of these teams that weren't especially good, yeah, not a national champion, right? So we shouldn't really value that too much, but teams apparently like the pedigree, and he is a winner, as they say. But more than that, he has flashed, and he's going into an offense with the best receiver in football in Justin Jefferson, and a great now second-year player in Jordan Addison after a great 2023 rookie year. TJ Hawkinson as a weapon can be his Colston Loveland if you watch the Michigan offense. Great tight end prospect for next year. He's got 2 of the best tackles in the league, Brian O'Neill, Christian Darrisaw. It's a good offensive line in front of him. He's going into a great situation to be effective, not to mention teaming up with Kevin O'Connell, who turned Josh Dobbs into the Pastronaut, right? And it seemed like he got a lot out of whoever was playing quarterback. Now that you have someone with an above average arm and mobility, and has shown the ability to go through progressions as well, this is a semi-advanced player for his age, and I think he could end up being a top 5 pick in the draft. Now, does that mean he's a guaranteed lock to go in the top 10 or top 15? No, absolutely not. But when you play the most valuable position, and teams like a bunch of different things about you, check off a bunch of boxes, that's generally a player that goes pretty high in the draft. And I think number 4 overall is certainly not out of the question. And you'll see people mocking him at number 2 now to the Commanders, or number 3 to the Patriots. It's a very interesting scenario that could play out, but we'll have to see what happens. Chargers on the clock at number 5. Could absolutely be an offensive lineman here, but with trading Keenan Allen, Justin Herbert needs weapons. You don't really have too many good receivers under contract beyond 2024. In fact, you don't have any, really. You have Quentin Johnston and Darius Davis, who's a return man. You need more. In a stacked receiver class, I could see the Chargers going O-line, maybe Joe Alt, maybe Talisa Fuanga. Maybe they trade down, especially if the Vikings don't move up to 4, right? But with Marvin Harrison Jr. on the board, that's who I'm going to go with, leaving the Giants open to take Malik Neighbors at 6. I think and I've talked about these guys so much, I feel like I don't have to do a ton right now. Both of these teams need receivers, and they're great receiver prospects. I think the Titans at 7 would go Joe Alt. Alt is probably the best tackle prospect in this class. Still love Olu Fashanu. I think he's right up there. But Alt had such an amazing 2023 that I think he's going to be the first tackle off the board at this point here. April 1st. No April Fools. Falcons at 8. We're going to have our first trade. And I kind of hinted at this earlier. A little foreshadowing with the Cardinals. I'm going to have them move back up. This was a team that traded down last year from number 3. Texans moved up for Will Anderson. I think they moved back to 12, something close to that. And then they moved back up to 6, I believe, to take Paris Johnson Jr. Well, here we have number 11. We're going to move up to 8. We're going to add in number 90 to get it done. Could be some type of late round pick swap as well. The Cardinals have so many picks. I think you can comfortably give up 11 and 90 to move up to 8. And why would you do that? Well, you miss on Marvin Harrison Jr., but maybe you have a similar grade on Rome Odunze. We know you still need receiver. You wouldn't expect every receiver to be off the board of that top 3 by number 8, although it could happen. Titans at 7, maybe a bit of a wild card, but definitely expected to take a tackle at this point. But that sets up Rome Odunze at number 8. The Cardinals pull off exactly what they did last year with trading down and then trading back up for a top-tier player in the draft. And receiver's a big need, but Monty Osenfort, GM of the Cardinals, can play this smart, get an extra first-round pick, and still get a really, really good player. And interestingly enough, one that has been comped to Larry Fitzgerald. Who could live up to that? Almost nobody, right? Larry Fitz is, arguably arguably a top 3 or 5 receiver of all time. But Rome Odunze, similar play style, and I guess you could see him being a really good Arizona Cardinal. And at number 8, it's pretty good value, and you only have to give up number 90 as well. But I looked at, trade charts and things. It seems like that's about what the value would be. It's hard to say what a team would actually accept, right, or offer. But something like that seems within the realm of possibility. Bears at number 9. I have another trade here. And the Bears just don't have a lot of picks. 1 and 9. They have 2 top 10 picks, 3 in the top 75, but only 122 after that. Only 4 picks in the entire draft, and 2 of them are top 10 picks. Not exactly a team that is capable of filling out their roster through the draft unless you move down. And this is a very interesting one. You're going to have to strap in, essentially. I'm going to have the Cincinnati Bengals jumping up from 18. Look at all these picks. 49, 80, 97, 115, 149, 194, and then 4 picks in the 200s. They certainly have a lot of picks. They can afford to get rid of some of those. And they went out, they got a tackle in Trent Brown. We know about Orlando Brown Jr. They've got 2 solid tackles, you'd think. Their offensive line is not so bad. And maybe you go out and you try to complete the offense. How do I mean that? Well, you can trade potentially multiple picks, maybe 97, 194, 214, to move up all the way from 18 to 9. The Bears get a bunch of day 3 picks, number 97 being the most valuable that they're going to get in this bunch. It's a, 3rd round compensatory selection, 97. So that's a day 2 pick. But you get more picks to fill out your roster, and there might not be a player that you want at number 9, that you are comfortable taking at number 9 when they might be available, say, later down the board. We will offer that trade, and I'm going to have the Cincinnati Bengals jump the Jets for Brock Bowers. Yes, it seems like a lot to move up to go get a tight end. It's not a super valuable position, but Brock Bowers isn't your typical tight end. He's someone that can catch screens, can play in the slot, is just another great receiver to add to this offense, and he can block. Maybe not so great against true defensive linemen, but great against linebackers and DBs. Not only can he play in the slot, he can play in line as well. Not going to be elite against defensive linemen as a blocker, but he's such a great receiver that he doesn't necessarily have to be. And he's not a bad blocker, just, of course, he's not as good against the bigger bodies. He's a little bit light. I think he came in at the combine a little bit heavier than his playing weight, which is probably closer to the 230s. I think he was 240 plus at the combine. And we'll see if he holds that weight and can play up to it and develop some more play strength. And then he can be the complete monster tight end like maybe a George Kittle is. But Brock Bowers, I truly believe, is a top 10 player in the draft very comfortably, if not top 5. The Bengals, they move up a lot, but they have so much ammo late that a team like the Bears could be looking to pick up some extra late picks to fill out their roster. They still pick up another top 100, and the Bengals get a player that is easily a top 10 player in this draft for me in Brock Bowers. As we get to the Jets at number 10, that very easily could have turned the card in for Brock Bowers had he slipped to number 10. Instead, we go to Lisa Fuanga out of Oregon State. Now, here's my thought process. I get that they went out and signed Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses. They're 2 33-year-old tackles, with Tyron Smith especially having an injury history. Fuanga, we know that Joe Douglas already likes, it seems to be. So the Jets could very well still be in on a tackle. But what about one that has guard flexibility that can really help with not only protecting Aaron Rodgers, but against any defensive linebacker when you run the ball? He is such a big, powerful lineman, and it's not insane to think that he could move inside to guard. Then maybe John Simpson becomes your 6th lineman who you brought in, or Fuanga out of the gate can be your 6th guy that rotates in if there's an injury, and that happens all the time in the O-line. Maybe he can play right tackle or right guard or left tackle in a pinch. There are possibilities that getting another offensive lineman that's very good with flexibility gives your offense. Injuries happen all the time. Jets fans certainly know that after last season with Aaron Rodgers. You got to protect him, but if somebody goes down, especially like Tyron Smith, who cannot stay healthy for a full season, Fuanga makes sense. And maybe it's Troy Fautanu, right? Maybe it's someone that can play left tackle. Olu Fashanu. Maybe it's a left tackle. If you're thinking Tyron Smith is going to get injured, which ultimately does end up happening quite a lot. But there's been the connection there with the Jets and Fuanga, so I'm thinking there's a possibility that this happens, although it wouldn't shock me to see them go with a left tackle like Fa'atanu or Fashanu. And I do have confirmation. It is Fashanu, not Fashanu, I promise you. And it's not a guess. I have it from Olu himself. Shot him a DM, asked, and he answered. Apparently also a fan of Detroit Lions franchise on the channel. So very cool to see that. But yes, Fashanu. It is Fashanu, not Fashanu. Something to keep in mind. Falcons at 11. You trade down from 8. Maybe you take Odunze there. It's a possibility. But I think you could probably expect them to take an edge rusher. And you got a lot of good ones still available at 11. All of them. And even though people are saying it's, maybe Dallas Turner is not edge 1 to the Falcons, maybe things have changed with a new head coach coming in. They're going to run a 3-4 defense, and it's tough to find a better 3-4 outside linebacker in this draft than Dallas Turner. You guys probably at this point know how much I love Leatu Latu and have for the past year plus, but at the same time, his injury history, it scares me. I don't know how high he's going to end up being drafted, even though I absolutely love him as a player. Dallas Turner doesn't have that. He is a freak athlete and is an all-around solid player. And his athleticism tells you that even though he has a high floor as a player, he might be able to have a high ceiling as well, just because the freak athleticism that Dallas Turner offers is freaky, for lack of a better word. Broncos at number 12. This one was interesting because I thought about edge, thought about interior defensive line, thought about wide receiver after trading Jerry Jeudy, certainly thought about corner with all the top corners on the board. I eventually settled for Byron Murphy. He might be the best interior defensive lineman in the class. They're super weak there, and he can pencil in right away as a 3-4 defensive end with nose tackle flexibility because he did do some of that at Texas. He's a really good run defender with great pass rush ability because of his overall athleticism. He's a great player, worthy of a top 15 pick. The Broncos could go so many different ways here, including quarterback, maybe Bo Nix, maybe Penix, maybe a trade down and take either of those guys. But I am skeptical about Nix and Penix being first-round players. Penix, especially with the injury stuff. The talent is there. And I've said that. I really think he's a great player. You worry about him a little bit throwing over the middle of the field. Just didn't really do it a ton at Washington. Same thing with Jaden Daniels at LSU. Penix can certainly stretch the field, though, especially on the outside. Great arm. And we'll have to see. The injury stuff, that does matter. That's why Latu falls every time for me. That's why Penix falls out of the first round every time for me. That's why Johnny Newton has fallen. And Cooper DeJean. Injury stuff just does push these guys down the board a little bit. But, you have to wean out and kind of decide, okay, which are the significant injuries versus things you don't really have to worry about. Maybe that's more of where Newton, falls into place, or DeJean. DeJean, more of a serious injury, but long-term, it really shouldn't affect him too much. Broken leg, right? So, he's someone that I do expect to be a first-round pick. But if someone views him more as a safety, real chance he falls out of the first round. Just depends on how these teams view these guys. Only 32 players can be first-round picks, right? And sometimes even less when the Dolphins get a pick stripped. At number 13, we have the Las Vegas Raiders, another potential QB spot, but I also think that J.C. Latham is a plug-and-play right tackle for them, especially after you lose Jermaine Illuminor. Just makes too much sense for me. Defensive tackle is a big need. Murphy's off the board, but you bring in Christian Wilkins, who is without question better than Byron Murphy right now. So, yeah, I think tackle, especially one that could start right away at right tackle, kind of a no-brainer. Raiders fans will be upset, worried that, Alabama right tackle, Alex Leatherwood. No, he's not Alex Leatherwood. Leatherwood was a shock to see go in the first round. Latham would be a shock to me if he got out of the top 20. Saints at 14, go with Olu Fashanu. Again, as I mentioned just recently, it is Fashanu as opposed to Fashanu. Saints really could use a tackle, man. I've talked about the Ryan Ramczyk injury stuff. Trevor Penning is not exactly worked out for the Saints so far. They have no depth, really, and I think it's pretty much got to be a tackle at 14 based on the way things appear right now. Colts at 15. Well, Brock Bowers doesn't fall like he sometimes does for me. Team trades up for him. And here the Colts are at 15. What do you do? I really do agree it's corner or wide receiver. Maybe you go out and try to improve your offensive line, but I like their offensive line more than I like their receiving core or their defensive backs. And I would say, just based on who's available, I think Brian Thomas Jr. just needs to be the guy. I think he is a top 20 pick. It's been tough to get him in there in some of these mock drafts, but I think he's a top 20 guy. And the Colts, I think, build around Anthony Richardson. I like that you were able to extend Michael Pittman Jr. I love Josh Downs. Brian Thomas Jr. is like, picture Alec Pierce's role, but Brian Thomas Jr. doesn't really have to leave the field, and he's a more complete player and better than Alec Pierce is. But he's someone that can stretch the field, big-time deep threat, really good size, really good player. And at 6'4", I think he actually might be closer to 6'3", 209 pounds at the combine. He certainly has wide receiver 1 type size, but can really stretch the field in a way that Michael Pittman Jr. can't quite. Seahawks at 16. It just always seems to make too much sense for me here. I'm going Troy Fautanu. He could probably stick at tackle, but he also might be a phenomenal guard. And he might be, if you're considering him to be a guard, might be the best guard in this draft. Seahawks lost a lot on the offensive line. And it doesn't hurt to draft a guy that's so good that he could play guard, maybe even center if you needed him to, but he would likely be a guard here, or tackle if one of Abe Lucas or Charles Cross go down. Just it makes too much sense. At 17, I have the Jacksonville Jaguars. I'm going to go Quinyon Mitchell from Toledo. I think there's a pretty good chance he's the first corner off the board. It could be Nate Wiggins. It could be Terrion Arnold. But Quinyon Mitchell is certainly in that conversation. And I think he's good enough to be. I've talked about this, most of the entire cycle that we've started bringing him up. And this is not a new development. Was not surprised to see him dominate at the Senior Bowl. Was not surprised to see him put up crazy numbers at the Combine. Great player, great athlete, and we know Trent Baalke loves his good athletes. Just makes a ton of sense for Jacksonville to go this direction. Bears on the clock at 18. Now, originally, when I was trading down with, and I, thinking Ryan Poles, Bears, what is the mindset here? Well, we need a center. And Jackson Powers Johnson, you can't really rationalize at 9, but I think you can totally sell me on that at 18. But the edge rushers are still available. Jared Verse is still available. And of the 4-3 defensive ends in this class, he's probably the best one. Latu's more of that 3-4 outside linebacker, although could fit in a 4-3. Dallas Turner more of the 3-4 outside linebacker. Chris Braswell certainly. Chop Robinson. All these guys are like 3-4 outside linebackers. Of your top edge rushers in this class, Robinson's a 3-4 versatile guy, but is a 4-3 defensive end type player, and then can kick inside on, clear passing downs. Adisa Isaac's a 4-3 guy, but it could be 3-4 as well, but is not going to be a first-round pick, I don't think. Marshawn Neeland, I would say, is more of a 4-3 end, but not going to be a first-round guy. Ellis is more of a 3-4 outside linebacker, designated pass rusher. Verse is like the clear and obvious 4-3 end that you just cannot pass on at 18. Figure out center later, which you don't love to say, but offensive line, historically, one of those positions you can find players down the board, especially. This is a good, sneaky, underrated center class. Jackson Powers Johnson probably is a first-round pick. Zach Frazier is such a talented player, going to be a starting center. Cedric Van Pran could start in the league. And then you have the great athletes down the board like Tanner Bordellini and Dylan McMahon. A lot of people love Hunter Norzad from Penn State. This is a really solid center class. Matt Lee, I know a lot of people like as well. It's a really solid center class. And you can find starters outside of the first round at center, obviously. So Verse is just who we end up prioritizing here. And we'll figure out center later. Rams at 19. I'm going to go Leatu Latu. As I've said, I just think he's so good. I'm trying to make sure this is in frame here for you guys. But he's just a tough player to pass on. He's so talented. Again, I am worried about the injury stuff, but with the top couple of edge rushers off the board, Latu just makes sense to grab here at this point. I think there is a bit of a drop-off after him, and I do also think he's about the best edge rusher in this class, but Robinson's more athlete than anything right now, but he's such a talented athlete. Such a freak, juiced up, twitched up pass rusher. Really fun player, but still developing as a player, as a football player, more than just the athlete. Steelers at 20. So I'm looking at who I have here selected previously. It's just tough for me to get off that. I mean, like, I know Jackson Powers Johnson is here. You can see a plug-and-play starting center, but I'm going to go with Amarius Mims. And it comes down to this. I think Amarius Mims is about the best tackle in the class. Purely based on tape at right tackle, size, mobility, strength. The only question mark, and it is a big one, can he stay healthy? We've only seen him start, I think, 8 games at Georgia. That's concerning. But when he's on the field, he is so good. And we talk about a developmental tackle. As far as prospects go, he's not raw. He does not have a ton of developing to do. And now every prospect has developing to do. But he's not like, drafting a Kingsley Suamataia or especially a Kieran Amagaji, right? Someone especially raw like Amagaji. Could be a future starter. Very actually raw. Doesn't really know how to fundamentally use his strength yet. Mims knows how to play the position. He just has struggled to stay healthy. And that's just really in 2023. He was someone that earned the starting job down the stretch in 2022. He just was underneath some other talented players at that point. Broderick Jones, maybe being even one of those guys. Now he teams up with him. Broderick Jones moves to left tackle. Mims starts at right tackle. You're golden. You're going to be able to run the ball. And whoever that quarterback is, right now Russell Wilson, maybe Justin Fields, they should have time back there. Should have time. Dolphins at 21. I'm going to go Jackson Powers Johnson. Thought about Johnny Newton here. I think JPJ just probably goes in and can compete to start at any 3 of those interior offensive line positions. You lose Connor Williams, but it's not all bad because you go out and sign Aaron Brewer, who I like from Tennessee. Robert Jones at right guard, staring me in the eye as someone that could probably be upgraded upon. My gut instinct. I would say that Isaiah Wynn at left guard is interesting, for sure. But you've got JPJ, Jackson Powers Johnson from Oregon, that has the size and speed to play any of the guard spots or center. And I keep going back to it with O-line. There will be injuries. Happens every year for every team on the offensive line, and really every position. But the offensive line, those guys are almost irreplaceable. If you can have someone that in a pinch can play whatever position you need, that gives you value right away. But Jackson Powers Johnson, I'm thinking starting right guard right away, basically, or he can potentially come in at center and compete for that job. But I think more I see him as a guard with Miami, just based on who they have there right now. And then, of course, is I happen to like Aaron Brewer. Eagles at 22 go with Terrion Arnold. Just tough to pass him up at this point. Offensive line seems like what we expect them to always do. Howie Roseman, we just expect them to build through the trenches. Trade Hassan Reddick. Maybe it's an edge rusher, although I doubt it. Their backfield, their secondary, I should say, defensive backfield, it's just not very good. Just isn't. You have a lot of aging talent in there as well. James Bradbury did not have it in 2023, and you paid for it desperately. Teams passed on the Eagles at will. Look at the numbers. They're horrendous. You could definitely go out and get a DB. It's a big-time need. Cardinals at 23. Speaking of DBs, going to put Nate Wiggins in Arizona. Next corner off the board. Great player. A ton of speed. He's got overall good height. Arms came in a bit shorter than I was expecting at the combine, and he was way lighter than expected. But he's got good ball skills. He's very fast on the field. The 40 time is no joke. So, get a potential lockdown field corner. Pretty good. Cowboys at 24. Going with Graham Barton from Duke. And the reason being, you lose Tyler Biotish. I think he goes to Washington with the Commanders. You could use a starting center. You could use a tackle as well, but the top tackles are really off the board unless you're going Tyler Guyton, right? And that's a total possibility. But Barton, I just think, gives you flexibility across the offensive line. You could move Tyler Smith out to tackle. He's a great guard. No question. But when you drafted Tyler Smith, you didn't draft him to be a guard. I think you drafted him to be a tackle. And you lose Tyron Smith. Maybe he's not quite the tackle that he is a guard, and this is just speculation. But if he can play really well at guard, like the way Zach Martin can, maybe he can also be a really solid tackle, like is what he played at Tulsa. It's what you think he could be in the NFL. There's a possibility there. You draft Graham Barton to play guard then, or center. I just think he's a guy that he's a Band-Aid for a bunch of different wounds or cuts, if that makes sense. Packers at 25. I just don't think they go offensive line here. Cooper DeJean's available. I do it every time. He's available every time. He might go earlier than this. Seems like a no-brainer for the Packers if they're on the board. It makes way too much sense. Bucks at 26. I'm going to go Chop Robinson. Their pass rush is in dire need of something more. Of course, Jack Barrett was great for a while. He's now with the Dolphins, I believe. You need something more. Joe Tryon-Shoyinka, maybe not looking like a great first-round pick. Chop Robinson has top-tier athleticism. You're thinking about a moldable ball of clay here. The hands are not terrible. He's just not evolved yet. He flashes a swipe. Doesn't really have many counters. Doesn't have a lot of tricks in the bag. But is just overall, he's faster. He will get to the corner. And he will show enough bend to get to the QB. He is a freak athlete. Production wasn't crazy. Still developing as a player. The athleticism is absolutely ridiculous. And I like his fit in Tampa Bay. Or in Tampa with the Bucks. Cardinals back on the clock for a third time. Here at number 27 overall. I'm going Johnny Newton. I feel like with the Cardinals, we've just done a pretty good job of taking arguably the best player available at that pick. And they happen to be a position of needs as well. Johnny Newton, instant starter on the defensive line. Tough not to like that. Bills at 28. I often find myself going receiver here, and I will continue to do that when Adonai Mitchell falls. You lose Gabe Davis. I think you bring in Curtis Samuel, but he would not impact taking a receiver, in my opinion, especially when he's more of like someone you project to the slot, even though you have Khalil Shakir, Stephon Diggs, of course, on the outside, but you don't have size on the outside. Adonai Mitchell brings in size. I think he's actually 6'2", not 6'4", 200-plus pounds at the combine. Ran really well. Effort may be a bit of a concern at times. You know, he said things like, oh, I ran most of my plays at 80% so I could stay out on the field for a full drive. Well, in the NFL, you probably wouldn't have to do that. You can rotate guys, but he offers much-needed size and jump ball ability, but is a really smooth route runner. Can really get open. So I like Adonai Mitchell. I think he's a first-round talent, and we'll see if he can develop into being more of a complete player. Lions at 29. Kool-Aid McKinstry is there, and with a lot of the stuff happening in Detroit right now, I think cornerback is certainly in play. And it was even before Cam Sutton was like accused of assault or something. Again, can't confirm or corroborate any accusation. All I can say is it's happened. I think he was arrested for it. So I know you go out, you make a trade for a corner with the Bucks, Carlton Davis. Cornerback still very much in play long term, and then Kool-Aid McKinstry certainly makes sense. Ravens at 30. I think it's a trade down spot, potentially. But with Tyler Guyton still available after losing Morgan Moses, Ronnie Stanley being a constant injury concern, tackle is a big need, and Tyler Guyton's a pretty good pick here. I feel like he makes great sense at 30. 49ers might have been disappointed that he didn't get to 31. But we can pivot with Kingsley Suamataia. Could be Jordan Morgan there as well. I love the potential of Suamataia. A little bit raw. Could play guard potentially. Has played left tackle and right tackle. You saw Senior Bowl reps, looked quite good at right tackle, and I think that's a possibility for his long-term position in the league. Cousin of Penei Sewell. Could be an interesting fit with the Lions, but they just don't really need O-line right now when you bring back Graham Glasgow and Kevin Zeitler for a year. It's still a possibility, but I think corner may be a bit more of a pressing need. For the 49ers, though, it's just always going to be O-line for me. The thing is once Kool-Aid McKinstry goes off the board, I'm just not thrilled about the boundary corners. I like Kamari Lassiter a lot. Ennis Rakestraw is fun, but I don't know if he's a first-round player. And you have a lot of slot corners. TJ Tampa, I'm not overwhelmed with his ability. Sainer still is a slot. Just typically, you don't see those guys go in the first round. I'm not going to have a higher grade on any nickel corner over Brian Branch. Brian Branch went at 45 last year. But Kyrie Jackson, big size on the outside. Andrew Phillips, probably a slot. Melton could be a slot, maybe sticks on the outside. Chris Abrams, drain, slot. Just a lot of slot corners. And those guys just don't go in round one, typically. Maybe you can say Trent McDuffie, but McDuffie also can play on the outside as well. Love Trent McDuffie. Speaking of the Chiefs, and here they are. Rashee Rice, I don't know what's going on with that. I won't even get into it. Just drag racing, you could kill people. We not see this already with Henry Ruggs? Like, why are we being stupid? Even if you're not driving, if it's your car and you're letting your friends do it and you're in there in the car, you're a willing participant, it would seem. I can't say for certain, but he could be in some legal trouble. Receiver looms larger than ever. The receiver situation did not get better recently, and it was already really bad. At number 32, I need to take a receiver, and I think the best one available might be Ladd McConkey from Georgia. He's a really good route runner with plus speed. I know we see wide receiver, we think slow, small, and slot. He is really neither of those. Can play in the slot, but can also play on the outside, can win deep down the field, great route runner, very good hands, very good speed, very good player. Will compete to be wide receiver 1 on that team right now. I know they signed Hollywood Brown for a year. Ladd McConkey is very good. And I could definitely see him getting into the first round. That's the Mock Draft Monday. Thanks for watching. Subscribe if you're not subscribed already. And I'll see you in the next one. Take it easy.